Recording? All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Chelsea. I am a social worker. I work for Mount Carmel. I work in their population health department, and then I also do these. I am very relaxed, so if you have any questions or comments, just shout them out. I don't mind at all because I will get talking and focused and not pay attention to what's going on out in front of me. So, but today, obviously, we're talking about understanding stress and how to be stress hardy. Everyone experiences all different kinds of stress, and when we experience too much stress, that's when we need to try to find those coping mechanisms so that we can handle it and continue doing what we need to do. So just kind of what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about what stress is, how to become stress hardy and more resilient, which are synonymous with one another, the 7 dimensions of wellness and how one part of those, if you're stressed, can affect the others, how to manage the stress, and then relaxation and reduction for you, which is a big thing for stress reduction. So stress, obviously, this is the definition of stress. It's worry or mental tension caused by a difficult situation. It is a natural human response, so everyone feels stress. And we all experience it to some degree. But there is good stress and bad stress. I feel like when we use the word stress, we all think very negatively about it. So there is the good stress, which is eustress, is what it's called. Hi. So for eustress, it's the good stress, for lack of the eustress has a lot to say over and over again. It motivates you and focuses your energy. It's usually short term, so there's an end to this sort of stress. And we feel like we can cope with it. So even though it's a stressful situation, we don't have concerns that we're not going to be able to deal with it, even when we know it's coming. Sometimes it can even feel exciting, which I know sounds a little not like what we think of when we think of stress, and it also can improve your performance. So kind of the 3 things that I put on there as examples. So a promotion at work. Obviously, you're getting more responsibilities. You might have different working hours. You might not feel like you know exactly what you're doing, but that's like that good stress because it's exciting to get a promotion at work. If you're moving to a new home, again, the stress of packing, unpacking, figuring out the logistics, but it's still that excitement of getting into a new place. And then one also is retiring. I know that can cause a lot of anxiety and stress for people because we're used to working all the time, but retiring is also exciting because you don't have to go into work every day. You can kind of do what you want. You can make new hobbies, but it still is a stressful time. So those are kind of those examples of the good stress that can help you feel excited about something, but you're also kind of, when we talk about bad stress, you can relate it that when I have good stress, this is how I deal with those things. So when I have bad stress, I can use some of those same coping mechanisms to use that as like a go-between between the two. So bad stress. Obviously, we have all had bad stress. This causes anxiety. It can be short and long-term. Whereas with eustress, we feel like we can cope with it. With the bad stress, we can't cope with it. We feel like there's no solution to it. It feels unpleasant. It can decrease our performance. And then long-term distress can lead to physical and mental health issues. So examples for that is illness. So obviously we can have a short-term illness or we could have long-term illnesses that we have to deal with on a daily basis. Those are things that you feel like you can't overcome on your own. So that can cause that bad stress. Any sort of interpersonal conflict, so that could be work relationships, personal relationships, whatever that is. Any sort of sleep problems. Sleep is super important to decreasing your stress. This is the one that I'm terrible at. Me and sleep don't get along is what I like to say, but sleep can just kind of add on to that stress. When you're not sleeping well and taking care of your physical, your stress can just kind of get unmanageable. And then any sort of financial strain, obviously, is another example of that bad stress, that where we feel like we can't catch up with bills or something like that can cause that distress. And then kind of just to really hit home between the two of them. So for the good stress, the eustress, it's mild or transient. So which means, it's going to come and go. It's not something that sticks around where distress is. With eustress, you have clear, actionable tasks. So one of the examples I gave was moving. So when you're moving, you can make a packing list. You can do all these check marks to make sure that everything goes okay. Whereas with distress, you have no actionable solution. So like with financial strain, for example, like if you would lose your job, which is distress, like you don't know where that money is going to come from and you feel like there's no solution to that. You feel confident you can overcome it with eustress, whereas with distress, you can become very self-critical, and you ruminate on the what ifs. Whereas with eustress, you have compassion for yourself and you can still practice your consistent self-care. While when you're in distress, you kind of move away from your self-care actions because you feel like it's just unmanageable. So there's warning signs that you're having too much stress because sometimes we don't know. We feel like we're managing it, but really we're not. So there's physical signs of too much stress. So you can have shortness of breath, headaches, upset stomach, fatigue. Behavioral, I think a lot of people, the surprise is that it can increase your forgetfulness. When you're super stressed, you're not remembering to do all the things that you normally would be able to do. I know that's one of my big indicators when I'm having too much stress is that I'm forgetting, it seems like everything. And then there's the psychological of it as well. And those are those feelings, whatever you feel when you are stressed, and everyone feels it differently. So it can be the gamut of it. You have the sadness, anger, anxiety, loneliness, helplessness, and despair. And that's when these are the warning signs of too stress when you're getting into chronic distress, which can cause a lot of physical and psychological problems and really start to impact you. Has anyone ever felt like they've seen any of these warning signs in themselves? Me. As I say, I'm sure everyone has. Do you feel like you do have coping skills that you use sometimes? You don't have to share them. I know that's a lot to ask to share what your coping skills are, but do you feel like you have any that you utilize? Good. I'm seeing some nods, so that's good. So we have kind of a base to work with. So just to kind of hit it home, so prolonged chronic stress affects everything. It affects your health, your well-being, your self-esteem, your job performance, and your overall productivity. So even if you're having stress just at work, it's going to impact your home life. And I'm sure you all have seen this with stressful situations. And the same thing if you're having stress at home, it's going to impact your work. So I think sometimes we all try to compartmentalize our stress, that if it's home, I can go to work and not think about it. But that's not really true because it impacts us in ways that we don't even see sometimes. So we kind of have to always be looking at how our stress is impacting us so we don't get into this prolonged chronic stress that starts affecting us in everywhere. So how do we do that? Because it sounds great, but how do you actually do that? It's easier said than done sometimes. But this is our wellness wheel. So on the wellness wheel, this is kind of where it shows you where all of your wellness areas are. So you have the emotional, intellectual, your social, spiritual, environmental, physical, and occupational. So all of those 7 things all interact with one another. And if one section of that is causing you that distress, it's going to impact all the rest of them. So when you're kind of looking at this, I'm sure you can think in your brain of times, or even if it's now, where one of those you had the most stress in, but you can see how it would impact the rest of those. Because if you're stress at work, you have a deadline, you have just been dealing with stressful situations. I see that we have some of our EMS firefighters here. You've had really tough calls that day. You're not going to want to go home and have a social connection with someone. You're probably most likely going to want to just be alone. And so, but when you're doing that, you're not feeling that social wellness, because we need that. We need social interaction to help with that stress. So now your social wellness is kind of going down. You're getting stressed there as well. And then they can all just interact with one another. So just to kind of, take home the point that we can think that we're compartmentalizing, but really we're not. It's affecting every area of our life. So how do we become stress hardy and resilient? What can we do to help ourselves? So stress hardy individuals see any stressor, whether it's eustress or distress, as a challenge rather than a threat. They usually feel control of their life situations, and they have a sense of commitment rather than alienation. So it's kind of a mindset that you have to actively think about, because it's easy when you're having these high stress situations to kind of just want to almost be like an ostrich and put your head in the sand a little bit. It's too much to deal with. Nothing's going to change, so I'm just going to let the stress build up. If we look at it more in this resilience lens, then you can start to like look at it as a challenge. So a good example work-wise is like you have a deadline of a project that's due Friday, let's say, but things are going to pop up Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And so if we look at it as a challenge instead of all of these things are piling on me, then we can start moving towards task focus, which takes some of that stress away for that specific example. You see it as your personal control. So you can manage your own life. And that's not saying some things are unmanageable. Some things we have no control over whatsoever. But that's also recognizing some things we don't have control over and only really focusing and trying to change the things that we can. So the true mastery of that is like, even when a challenge isn't possible, hardy people still work to find possibilities of what comes after that. So some things we can't change, but how do we move past it is kind of what that personal control is. And then commitment. So if we don't feel like what we're doing has a purpose, if we feel like even if our personal life doesn't have a purpose, it's hard to do those first two things because you kind of get in that mindset of why? Like, why do I do it? So to find whatever your purpose is when you're doing things is what's important. And hard to do. It's not, none of this is easy. You really have to work at it. But when you do it often and think about it in situations, it then becomes part of what you do and you don't have to think about it anymore. So starting it is hard, but once you do it every day, it becomes easier and easier. So ways that we can build resilience is that you want to nurture your relationships, because when you do, then you have those supports when you are feeling stressed and you need someone to talk to, you have those supports. We want to take care of our physical and mental well-being. Not everyone wants to run a marathon, and that's okay. I'm included in not wanting to run a marathon for my physical well-being, but like it's getting nice out. So taking walks, even if it's just a 5-minute walk outside, really can do more for your stress than we think that it can. Embracing change, which I know is very hard for everyone. We get stuck in our ways. We do it this way and we want to continue doing it this way. But when we look at change as a challenge, like we talked about, it helps to embrace that change and to want change and to do things better, find different ways to do things. We always want to try to maintain perspective in difficult situations, which is much easier said than done. When you're in that situation, it is hard to remove yourself from it and look at it in perspective. But something that you can try to work on with smaller problems. So then the more you work on it, it becomes natural when larger stress situations happen. Develop problem solving skills, whatever that looks like for you. There's all kinds of apps and games that you can play that I know it sounds very silly, but even like Tetris games, it makes your brain figure out problems and you can then transfer that over to other issues that you're dealing with. And then we want to learn stress management techniques. So there are 5 most common stress management techniques. First, we have to identify them. Sometimes we don't even know what's stressing us out. We just feel it. And I know that sounds a little crazy, but sometimes we really don't know where our stress is coming from or what the triggers are to cause us stress. So you want to start identifying what they are. So we all know what it feels like when we're stressed because we have all experienced stress. When you experience it, you want to start thinking about what triggered that stress reaction in you, because then you can start to manage those triggers. If you know that, we'll go back to the work example, you have something due on Friday. And if you're anything like me, I'm a large procrastinator. And so sometimes I won't start working on it until Thursday. Well, that is going to be a trigger to ramp my stress up on Thursday. So one of the things I can do to manage that stress is to start working on it the week before, doing it in smaller chunks instead of trying to do it all at the same time. So those kind of things. Um, Practicing relaxation. This is a really big one that I think kind of seems a little like woo woo, or like no one, like if you're not really into yoga or those kind of practices, you feel like that's not really going to help. But it doesn't even need to be anything as intense as going to an hour yoga class, because we all can't do that. Some of us don't want to, myself included, and it's just not practical. But you can do deep breathing exercises that are 2 minutes long, that when you start practicing it in stressful situations, it calms your heart rate down. It kind of gives you a reset to be able to deal with the issue that you're currently dealing with. Meditation is a big one. Meditation's hard to get into, I think, sometimes if it's not something that you're already practicing. There's all kinds of guided meditations. You guys have like a app, right? Like a health app, or no? No, just a wellness one. Okay, so there's all kinds of, like, Calm is one of the big ones I think that everyone probably sees a million ads for when you're online, but they do guided meditation. And there can be as long as, a 30-minute meditation to as short as like a minute or two. And just even doing that during your lunch, if you're having a rough day, it's not something you have to go to. It's something you can pull up on your phone, do in your car when you get home. So that way you can de-stress from work that day. Something quick and easy that will lessen that stress for you. And then one you can do like at night or in the morning, it's called progressive muscle relaxation. This one's hard because you really have to like be focused and not have any distractions. But essentially if you're laying in bed in the morning or in the evening, you take account of every muscle in your body and release the tension from all of them. I hold all my tension in my shoulders. I'm sure some of you will like recognize this. When I think about it, my shoulders are like up here sometimes. And so it's really like thinking like relax yourself, because your body's holding that tension. So practicing relaxation is really important, especially for the physical, because sometimes we don't notice how much of that stress and tension we're actually holding in our bodies. Exercise, again, is physical activity, whatever level that looks like for you, is one of the largest stress reductions that we have available to us. But then it also gives you like dopamine hits for your brain. So it not only is it relaxing you and taking that stress away, but it's also giving you some like happy juice from your brain to make you feel better. Connecting with others, also a really big one that we don't always think about when we are in high stress situations. If anyone's anything like me, when you're super stressed out, you don't want to talk to anyone, you don't want to see anyone, you're not trying to go to dinner with friends or family after work, you just want to go home, maybe watch a Netflix show and then go to bed. So connecting with others and finding support from friends and family is important, because when you isolate yourself, that's when you move into that chronic stress and that distress. Or also seeking guidance from a therapist if you feel like you're to the point where you can't manage it at all. And then make time for self-care. So whatever that looks like to you all, whatever your self-care is. Journaling, reading, going to the movies, going to the park, whatever that looks like, whatever your self-care item is, make sure that you're making time for it. Because it's very easy when you're in stressful situations to just be like, I don't have time to do this. It's not important. I have too much else to do. But it really is important to make time for that self-care, because it's not helping you. It's only hurting you when you're still trying to move through the stress and not also taking care of yourself. And then just some other ones that we don't always think about. I think we think of, the exercise, all those big ones. But so avoid your unhealthy coping strategies. We all know what those are for ourselves, because we know when we do it, it doesn't help anything. It might be an easy thing to kind of take your mind off of it for a second, but long term, it's not helping. So I call it the doom scrolling on my phone does not help when I'm stressed. It adds to it. Alter your expectations and attitude. So this is a hard one, I think. We can only do what we can do. We can't control what anyone else does. So if we go into situations thinking that, it can alter our expectations and attitude and then cause less stress because we are not stressed, but someone is not reacting or doing the things that we want them to do. Delegate or postpone tasks. I'm sure anyone who works in management, delegating tasks is not easy because it's simpler if you do it yourself and you get it done. But sometimes we have to delegate things, or we need to prioritize and postpone things that don't actually need to be done right now. Getting enough sleep is really important. Not getting sleep is not helping anyone deal with their stress. If your body is not well rested, you are just going to amp up that stress level. One of the things you can do is plan your day out, which I know sounds a little like too regimented sometimes, and sometimes we can't plan our day, but plan what you can and also be ready for change, like we said. Be willing to roll with it. Plan it as best as you can so that you know what you need to do, but leave room for change and to roll with it so that way you don't add more stress. Avoid excessive alcohol and substance use. Eating a healthy breakfast does more for us. It's that physical that we're helping to make sure that all of our wellness wheel is taken care of. Organize your space. If you are working in a very disorganized space, it causes more stress. When you're having to search for things, when even just being in a disorganized space can cause stress, which I know sounds a little like crazy, but it really can. Review your goals throughout the day and move them around as you need to. And then balance your work and play. So we all obviously have hard jobs. We all have things that we have to do for work, but we have to balance that. We can't let work consume us because otherwise it's going to throw off that wellness wheel and we're just going to be in this distress that we can't get out of. So we don't have to do this right now because I know people don't always like doing these activities when they're in groups, but you guys will have this presentation. So this is one of the things that you can do, like the breathing exercises that we talked about that are just a quick 2-minute, however long you need it to be, that is easy to do no matter where you are. Sometimes I think we get into this idea that to relax and to reduce our stress in the moment, we need to wait till after work. We have to wait until the situation's over. I don't have time to do it right now. This is a really easy one. All you're doing is focusing on your breathing. Super simple. That's all you have to do is focus on your breathing, set a timer on your phone for even just as short as a minute. And if all you're focusing on is your breathing, you will be surprised how much it actually does relax you and take a little bit of that stress away. So this is a really simple one. Obviously, there's more detailed ones that you can do, and a quick Google search will. If you put up like relaxation script, there's hundreds of them out there. And I think just kind of the last thoughts is that it's your responsibility to understand and manage and recover from stress. Even though sometimes other outside people, outside situations are causing our stress, no one else can manage it but us. So if we look at it as something that we have to manage, it takes away kind of some of the, well, it's just stressful and I can't do anything about it. So, no one else can do that for us. That has to come from us. And then it helps us to have that responsibility to not just respond to situations or not react to situations, but respond to them. Because when we're just reacting, that's when that stress gets even higher and it turns more into that distress. And then it also just means making a commitment to positively coping with your stress. If it's hard, this is very hard. I say all this with the knowledge that this is hard. I don't always do this all the time. It's not easy to take a minute when you're in a high stress situation to try to relax yourself. So that's why you have to make the commitment to do it, and then also start in smaller situations and don't start, in the my water heater broke and my basement's flooded. Like, that's not going to be the time that you're going to be like, this is when I'm going to start using my positive coping strategies. That's not where we want to start. We want to start with the smaller stresses and then work our way up so that it just becomes a part of our routine and that we are able to cope with that stress. And that's all I have. You guys have any questions? hopefully it was helpful. Hopefully you all are taking away something.